Paul George was supposed to be the final piece to end the process, the definitive perfect third option to play off of Maxey and Embiid. They certainly paid him like this would be the case, giving him a guaranteed 4-year, $211 million contract. He is making just short of $50 million this season, making him the 9th highest paid player in the league, and he is currently averaging 16.1 points per game, the lowest mark since his sophomore season. Paul George is all but certainly washed, and that spells disaster for the Philadelphia 76ers. Hello everybody, welcome to Rusty Buckets. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like on the video. Helps it better do better in algorithm. That's what I meant to say. Also, real quick, go ahead and check out the new channel called Little Rusty Buckets. We have been uploading pretty consistently over there. They're like 8-ish minute videos about kind of whatever I feel like talking about, whether it is niche basketball stuff or whatever. There's going to be a video coming out in a day or two that's about Bill Burr because I felt like talking about Bill Burr. Are you going to stop me? That's what I thought. So first off, I want to break down some film, specifically covering Paul George's most recent game, which was absolutely terrible, where he scored 2 points on 1 for 7 shooting in a loss to the Brooklyn Nets. I specifically honed in on his creation and defense in this game because shot creation has been the biggest concern for him on the offensive end, and then defensively, I'm not really sure where he had been at this year, so I wanted to get a good grasp of that as well. To be fair to Paul in this game, he was dealing with a lot of double teams because there was no Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, and I think the most important way to judge Paul George is as a third option. While he did just get all of this money, the expectation was for him to be a third option. So what matters the most overall is indeed how Paul would play with Maxey and Embiid, which, spoiler alert, he doesn't play well with them either. But even still, if you're making $50 million, you are expected to be the quality of player that can step up and make up for the difference of not having Maxey and Embiid there. And yet, he did quite the opposite of that. He took 7 damn shots, while his teammates Quentin Grimes and Kelly Oubre both had 30-point games. So I do also want to say about the aspect of him being double-teamed a lot, that's not a negative thing. It is a negative thing, however, if you aren't very good at dealing with double teams, and I think Paul did a pretty damn bad job of it in this game. Not only did he throw some bad turnovers out of these doubles, I believe all 3 of his turnovers were as a result of the double teams, but he also stopped looking for the ball because of the double teams. He let it actively discourage him from being aggressive in any capacity, because even if they are doubling you, if you pass well out of those doubles, you're actually creating a really, really good offense. But Paul was not able to leverage his gravity to his or his teammates' advantage almost at all. All right, our first play here is some weak side help out of the corner from Paul George, who manages to block this drive by Nick Claxton, and he passes it up, which eventually leads to a foul. This right here is a clean look at a catch and shoot 3 that just simply does not go in. Out of this pick and roll, we have D'Lo trying to float it up top to Claxton, but Paul is able to anticipate the pass and pick it off, then find Grimes on the break for a dunk. So some good defensive plays early from George here. This play is really where the lack of aggressiveness from Paul perplexed me, because right now Jared Butler is isolating on Nicholas Claxton, and Jared Butler is just not really somebody you want to look to as like a big-time shot creator by any means. And Paul is over here on this left wing, and he just kind of watches that happen. Doesn't demand the ball in any capacity. Again, when you are a $50 million a year player, you are making the kind of money that Paul George is. You should be doing better than this. You should be making shots like that one, because once again, this one, Paul George passes up a completely clean look. How do you not shoot this ball? Look how late of a contest D'Angelo Russell has, but George decides he would rather pass the ball. look, that's open. That's a wide open three, and he just chooses not to take it. And I felt like that was primarily a factor of just not being all too aggressive, not being all too confident in his own shot. Paul would play nearly the entirety of the first quarter, and then we get into about the 8-minute mark of the second. Here we get a really, really strong late contest from Paul George, who is stuck defending two players out of the corner, and he splits it perfectly and gets a great contest on that Cam Johnson three, even though he thought he was fouled. Right here, once again, we're going to see Paul George dealing with a double team and tries to throw the cross court to Kelly Oubre, which is picked off by Cam Johnson. I understand a little bit trying to go for the home run type play here, but even then, it's not like Kelly was about to have some really grand opportunity. I will say no one really did a great job of coming to the ball, but this is just a bad pass. So not dealing with the pressure of the double well. Once again, on the fast break, we are going to see a clean look at a three from the trailing Paul George. Does not go. Just as good of a shot as you could possibly ask for, and it just unfortunately does not drop. Moving on to the third quarter now. This is Paul George's first attempt in the game at trying to create his own shot, and he gets the only bucket he would get all game on that floater from around the free throw line. Looks like good things happen when you're aggressive, Paul. That's crazy. This possession, he attempts another shot off of the dribble, a snatchback crossover to the three, but that shot does not go in. Just absolutely brutal. On this one, he way oversteps on Cam Johnson and allows him to blow by him. Pretty much the only major defensive mistake he made the entire game. So credit to him that this is the only thing I could find to really nitpick. Here we have another poor response to a double team. That pass gets picked off. He rushed it. Just not the best basketball. Here we get another Paul George pull-up three, and it is not going to drop. On this play right here, Paul George sticks with D'Angelo Russell the whole possession like glue, and he blocks his attempt at a little floater / hook shot right there. Here is George actually responding to a double team well, a clean pocket pass to Kelly Oubre, who is a right position for the floater. Double teamed again, and collapses under the pressure again. Fast break opportunity for the Nets. Paul would only take one shot in the fourth quarter. As I mentioned, Kelly Oubre and Quentin Grimes both had 30-point games. Now, this is in part because of Paul George diverting the defense's attention. Obviously, the defense would rather George not score the ball over Oubre and Grimes, but because of his poor playmaking out of the pick and roll, or out of the doubles rather, and because he really was not chirping to get the ball pretty much ever, and all of that led to him rarely leveraging his gravity as a star player at all. The response to the doubles became less and less of a concern for George in recent years as his prominence within the offenses he's been in has declined, but he should still be way better at it than he is right now at the age that he is, especially how he was in this game. It really felt like George was entirely unaggressive. He wasn't looking for the ball. He wasn't looking for his own shot. Didn't really look very comfortable when he was taking the shots that he was, especially his off the dribble shots, which obviously Paul George is like the pinnacle of smoothness. So to go from that to looking like you were extremely uncomfortable was pretty damn jarring. Let's go ahead and take a look at some numbers here. As of today, the Sixers are 4.4 points better on offense with Paul George off of the floor. Overall, he does have an positive impact out there because as the Sixers are 6.7 points better on defense with him. So it seems like the defense for Paul is still there, not quite all defense like he had been in earlier stages of his career, but there were a lot of moments where he was the best defender on the floor for Philadelphia, so I got to give him that. But this is nowhere near the level of impact in totality that he had even last year. Paul has seen some decline that was pretty obvious to anyone really paying attention over the last couple of years. But the stark contrast between last year versus the Clippers and now cannot be understated, because with the Clippers last year, they were 9 points better on offense with him on the floor. That is a huge swing, and 5.3 points better on defense. So overall, we are going from like a +2 to a +14. We've gone from +14 to +2, rather. We're going in the negative direction. What a huge drop in impact. That's crazy. And it's not as though this is the case because the Sixers have some well-rounded roster. Like, if anything, the fact that the bench for the Sixers is as bad as it is should make them better with Paul George on the floor offensively as well. And yet that's not the case, because he keeps having these very ugly games where he's taking like 17 shots to get 15 points. George recently had a stretch of 9 games that it looked like he might be back. Like, truly, it looked like maybe this was just a really poor start to the season, adjusting to a new team, adjusting to a new environment and role, something that's pretty understandable, adjusting to his new teammates. Over this 9-game stretch, he averaged 21.8 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists, shooting 47, 45, 95 in his splits, taking over 8 3-pointers per game. So 45% from outside on 8 threes a game. Even then, for some reason, his overall plus-minus over those 9 games was -1 on average. So he still ended up being a net negative as a whole when he was putting up good numbers. Since then, he's had a 6-game streak where he has averaged 10 points on 41, 35, 88 splits, including this loss to Brooklyn. Philly overall went 1-5 in that stretch, and he wasn't entirely alone, all while they also took an L to Toronto. They took an L to Toronto. That's sad. There's a lot wrong with Philadelphia this year, and I wouldn't say that George is the number one problem right now. It's probably Joel Embiid's injury stuff, the fact that he's only played like 17 games. But in terms of the overall scope of this team and their potential, Paul George being washed is the end of the Philadelphia 76ers, as far as I'm concerned. Everything else aside, if Paul George isn't playing anywhere near all-star level for $50 million a year, which marks him as the 9th highest paid player in the entire league, then this team is done for. You have a dud. You have a huge chunk of your cap space going to a player who is barely a positive on the floor. That's a disaster. Between George, Maxey, and Embiid, they're taking up $135 million on the cap sheet this year. Next year, it's $144 million. And then it gets even bigger beyond that, because I think they're all on like a 3 or 4 year contract apiece. So they're going to be paying damn near $150 million a year for this core of players. There's almost no room left on the cap sheet to pay for anybody else. The next biggest contract on this team is Kelly Oubre, making $7 million, which is not a lot in the NBA. You just can't afford to pay for the top-notch role players anymore. This is the core 3, and we've barely even been able to see them on the floor together. Maxey has missed 8 games, which is overall marginal, but George has missed 18, and Embiid has missed 37 games. As I said, that's the number one issue in terms of why they've been so bad this year, but it's not like the Sixers have been great with Embiid. To be fair, Embiid's also not played anywhere near his best in that stretch, but they overall have an 8-9 record with Joel Embiid playing this season. And with Embiid, Maxey, and Paul George all playing, they have a record of 7-6, with most of those wins coming against lottery teams. The Bulls, the Hornets, the Jazz, the Blazers, the Spurs, and the Brooklyn Nets. I believe it was the Spurs pre-De'Aaron Fox, but I could be wrong about that. The only impressive win of the entire bunch with Embiid this year is their Christmas Day win against Boston. That's it. And they didn't even have Drew Holiday in that game. They also got like 13 minutes of Porzingis in this game. So the Celtics were shorthanded, and the Sixers narrowly beat them. Their net rating, with the three of them on the floor together, is just plus 2.4. Obviously, for a team that's like 20 and 30 something, or whatever the fuck the Sixers are right now, plus 2 for a lineup is probably better than most of their lineups, but it's not nearly as good as it needs to be for the fact that this team was projected to be in contender conversations. Also, remember how I said that the best metric, the best way to judge Paul George would be like by looking at how he plays next to Embiid and Maxey? Well, in the 13 games they played as a trio, Paul George averaged just 12.5 points on 39.4% shooting. That's not encouraging. With the least amount of pressure from the defense on him, he is still dramatically disappointing. If George can't effectively be a third option, and he can't even effectively step up to be a 1 or a 2 even, what is the value? What does he bring to the table? Pretty good defense and like respectable 3-point shooting. He's probably their best perimeter defender, but I don't know that we're ever going to see 20 plus points per game Paul George again. This sucks as someone who loves Paul George, because for me, he was the first rising superstar experience I ever saw, because I watched him in my first couple of years of watching basketball. Paul George was such a prominent figure because of what he and the Pacers were and what they meant for the Miami Heat, as they were the only team that really put pressure on them like that, besides for the Celtics in 2012. So I loved those teams. I've liked Paul George for his entire career, but he is 34 years old, and he just doesn't have it like that anymore. Not to mention, he's had a bunch of lower body injuries. He is historically getting injured more and more his last couple of years, and he has virtually no athleticism left in him. Like, he moves fine enough, but he doesn't have crazy verticality. He is not doing anything like his dunks on Birdman a decade ago. It's just not really in him like that anymore. The one thing that I expect to return and make George overall a better player than who he has been for the first 40-ish games for Philadelphia, I think his three-point shot is going to return to him. It did over that recent stretch and boosted his percentage a ton, that 9-game stretch that I mentioned. But other than that, he has shot the three ball terribly this year. But he's 9th all-time in three-point makes. He is a career 38.4% shooter on super high volume. This year, he is shooting a career low minus his rookie year and the one season for the Clippers where he only played 31 games. 36.3 is good enough percentage-wise. It's fine. It's respectable. It's about league average. But he can bump that up. He can get it back to being a really good three-point shooter. That's one aspect of his game that should just be there forever. And I think a lot of his poor three-point numbers has just come from the fact that he has spent a lot of time creating his three-pointers. Actually, I didn't even put that in this in these stats here, but let me actually go ahead and look at his percentage of threes assisted. Okay, percentage of threes assisted. This year, he's at 64%, which is a 10% dip from the previous year, although it's right about his average before that. So, yeah, I don't know. He also has, is that a career low? The second lowest 2-point assisted percentage of his entire career at 30.4. So, yeah, he's doing more creation than I feel like he should be, given that he's very clearly dropped off in that particular conversation. So if he could just hyper-focus on being a very high-volume, high-percentage three-point shooter, and then he's just a pretty damn good perimeter defender, that can work its way around to him still being a positive player. Like if Paul George turned into like an 18 point per game 3-and-D player who's taking 9 to 10 3-pointers per game, That's good. I'll also give him this. I don't think the Sixers have put him in the best spot to succeed because the pieces that he was expecting to be around him have not been in large part. The lineups he's in are super inconsistent, and thus his role is super inconsistent. He's even been asked to play the center position a lot this year. So it's not over, but I don't think we're going to be anywhere near is Paul George top 15 conversations again. I don't think Paul George is going to make an all-star team again. There is a chance that next season, after an off-season of retooling with Jared McCain coming back, maybe you can get a year of a pretty healthy Joel Embiid and a pretty healthy Paul George and Tyrese Maxey, who that's usually not an issue for. The three of them can have a better impact. Paul George can shoot the ball better, have a more definitive role. That is the most positive interpretation you can have of this situation, is that they could figure it out after a year, because sometimes it takes some teams time to adjust, again, especially if they are plagued with injuries. But that positive spin, that positive outcome, I still don't think it works its way around to being one of the best teams in the league. I don't think it works its way around to them being a genuine threat to the Boston Celtics, and if they made it to the finals, a genuine threat to the OKC Thunder or, the Spurs, who I think are right around the corner from contention. So, yeah, it's not over yet, but I think Paul George is definitively washed to a degree. Not out, it's not over, but it's close. It's pretty fucking close, and it's pretty sad. And man, being a Sixers fan must blow. At least you guys won the Super Bowl. All right, that's it. Bye.